Hello and welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with my co-host George Aldridge, and on today's show we're going to be sort of breaking down and discussing just the summer movie season really, sort of films that we liked, what we didn't, if there are any films that surprised us. This won't be a review as such because we've reviewed most of the films during the summer movie season, so this is just sort of going to be a chat, discussion, going from all the films. The summer movie season really started off with Furious 7, and we're going to be working up to the release that was FantasticFour, which was more or less sort of the unofficial close to the summer movie season. Once again, if my voice sounds different, it's because I'm a bit ill at the minute, but the show must go on, so we're going to go through it. So the film we'll go into first is Furious 7, which made 1.5 billion at the box office. I still didn't get to see this one, so if you want to take this one, George, sort of like what you thought of the film overall and how it stood up amongst the summer movie season.
Yeah, it's one of them where I've been a fan of the franchise. Obviously, the sort of teenage boys, fast cars, that sort of stuff. They've kind of grown and grown. They got The Rock in. The franchise really picked itself up. So it's one of them where it kind of, when that came out in April, it's like, right, blockbuster season started. Here we go. And I saw it and I liked it. It's got a few good bits. It's just one of them where, obviously, with the death of Paul Walker, there was a lot of not hype, but the complete change of production. A lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, so that affects it. And I think when you look at the money it made, 1.5 billion, I don't want to sound nasty or anything, but I think a lot of that's because of Paul Walker. There's a lot of people that probably wouldn't have seen it that wanted to see what it was like, and I thought as a film it was alright, and but it's got a really nice touching tribute. So the final 5-10 minutes is absolutely great and honours the memory of him. But it's one of them where I never expected 1.5 billion, and no one else did either.
Yeah, and I think that I've never really been a fan of the series. I haven't watched any of them, so I don't really know how they hold up as a series. But I think you're right there. I've just sort of checked how much the previous ones made. They sort of averaged around 600, 700 million. So that is quite a huge jump to get to 1.5 billion. And I think that is a big part of it, yeah. And I think, as I've heard a lot of fans say, that this is sort of could be the unofficial close to the franchise. I think they end it on a very sort of emotional high note. I know that a lot of people cried at the ending who are big fans of the series, and obviously they'll probably carry this on to Furious 10 or beyond. But I think that was another big thing. A lot of people saw this as what could be a fitting close to the series.
Yeah, definitely, and I think they'll carry on, but it could have been nice to close it that way. But you know, Universal, before we go into it, Universal's completely destroyed the box office this year. I mean, take out Star Wars in December and it's almost going to be a Universal wipeout over everything. But it was fun though. I mean, with these films, they're just fun. They've gone from car films to action films, and they're just entertaining. You kind of take yourself out. It's completely ridiculous, over the top, but for the past three, you're gonna have a good time watching them. But it's one of them where it kind of kicked off the start in a nice way, and again, it's just a touching tribute, which kind of made the film, I think.
Yeah, and really early on as well. I think this film came out March initially, and so for a March release to make this kind of money, and we'll sort of see this next year as well with Batman v Superman, which is now coming out in March. The summer movie season's really sort of starting a lot earlier now. It used to start around June time, sort of like came in with April with some of the Marvel releases the past few years, and now we're like progressing to March. So now we don't have such a long wait like between the January and February slump. Even next year as well, we're getting a Deadpool movie in February, so it just shows how it's sort of retreating back through the years. But really, Furious 7 sort of set the stage for one of the big tentpole movies to come out this year that's reached well over 1 billion. And I don't really know how many films we've had that have reached 1 billion yet. And obviously, going on throughout the rest of the year, we'll probably get a lot more, definitely with Star Wars and things like that. I don't know if we've had more films this year that have reached over 1 billion than we have other years, but this sort of set the stage. And then that continued on the following month with Avengers Age of Ultron, which made 1.3, not quite as much as the original Avengers, or as we said, like more than Furious 7, but still a huge, taking in for the Marvel franchise. And this is one that I want to kind of get your opinion on. When this film came out, I think you initially saw this about, what was it, like 4 or 5 times or something. It seemed like you were going more or less every other day to this movie.
Yeah, I saw it 3 times. I think it's when we just started. I got early screening, which was pretty cool to be fair for free. Then I
Mm.
had my normal midnight booked and with my mates booked. So it was one of them where first time I saw it, I loved it. And then I think one of my issues is that I can be a lot nicer just coming out of a film than kind of thinking about it. And it's one of them where I still think to say it was fun. However, the more I'm starting to think about it, it's not dropping off as in I think it's crap. I still think it's a good film. I think it's a fun film. However, compared to the other Marvel films, I just don't think it's as good as the rest. But one thing I do want to say that the first Avengers film, I'm not the biggest fan of that either. I mean, yeah, again, I like it, but I don't like love it. Like people put it at the top of loads of their lists. It didn't get anywhere near mine, most of
Yeah,
mine.
same.
And it's just one of them where looking at the MCU, you got Winter Soldier. I don't think anything will come close to that. Hopefully, Civil War can. There's Guardians of the Galaxy, which works as an outright comedy, which is why I like it. But the problem with Age of Ultron is that I've said again that it's meant to be a fun film, but they're trying to be too funny, and there's a massive difference between it now,
Mm.
and it's really starting to take effect on the audience. And I think, in all honesty, 1.3 billion, yeah, they're going to be wiping their hands. They've still got, a good 800, 900 mil profit on their sort of advertising, but a lot of people went into this year thinking, this could do 1.7, 1.8 billion, but I don't think anyone saw Fast 7 come in, and that kind of held off the Avengers at some stages, and then later on, when the next film came out, that kind of also toned down the Avengers, but it's one of them where I was surprised because I thought it'd be a lot darker, and I was kind of pissed off back then, but the more I'm looking at it's just a tough one. I think, I completely changed my opinion that Marvel had Joss Whedon way too tied down, especially when we're reading about some of the sort of deleted scene stuff that had to be cut.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to get that director's cut that we were perhaps hoping for, because I think that definitely a lot was missing from this film, sort of like Fantastic Four, which we'll discuss later on. But really, I think the whole film was like a bare bones version of what it was originally. Now, I mean, the film was long in itself. Did it need to be over 3 hours for an Avengers film? Like, no way. If it's that long, then the entire story and script has problems, and it needs like another, script revising and like. Cutting it down a bit more, but I do think the finished product we got wasn't Joss Whedon's original vision, which is always a shame. Um, and granted, yeah, it made 1.3, but I think Marvel and like everyone else expected it to do a lot more. Usually with sequels and a big franchise like this, you expect the sort of box office take-ins to sort of snowball with each one that comes out. And maybe that's a sign that audiences are starting to become disinterested with Marvel or Avengers, or it's the oversaturation with all the films that are coming out. I don't quite know if that's the case, but with this one, I just didn't hear many people talking about it afterwards. I mean, you still get people talking about the original Avengers movie. You still get people talking about Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy and like the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe like that. With this one, it just sort of came out. People went to see it. People probably didn't go and see it all that many times as much as they did with the first one, and as such, it just kind of sat at that. Now, we can't say it was a failure. I mean, 1.3 billion is definitely nothing to be sniffed at, so you can't say it was a failure. But I think that a lot of people had the same opinions as us overall. I mean, critics and public alike. I think that it didn't get that sort of hype or level of love that the first one did. And as well with the first one, when that came out, that was new. We hadn't really seen a superhero film that had set out in 2008 and said, like, we're going to do all these standalone movies and eventually so many years later we're going to join them all together. So I think that the novelty may have worn off a little bit when Age of Ultron rolled round.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing of Age of Ultron, before we go into Mad Max, no one really expected Mad Max to do that well.
Mm.
And that came out like I think 2 weeks after in America. So it's one of them where calendar-wise, the Avengers could have been not maybe smarter, but for just some reasons they didn't get what they wanted. But it's one of them where I think give it a year or two, there'll be a few people that aren't so keen, and it's very much I think a Dark Knight Rises debate where you have a lot of people that dislike it and a lot of people that love it.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll get onto Mad Max now. Then especially for a film of a franchise that ended in the 80s, it's a name that some people are aware of, but it's not a major name that, if you brought it up in conversation, people would know what you're talking about. Um, we had new actor in the lead role, obviously with Tom Hardy, original director back, and with the trailers, it just sort of looked like an all-out action movie, which is what it is. But for it to bring in that amount of money, with granted like a new generation and stuff, I think it's safe to say that we'll probably get a sequel. Didn't probably make as much as I expected it would. I was hoping it would kind of clear 500 mil. But I mean, 373 mil is still, a pretty decent taken for it, considering although it's part of a franchise, it is a very old franchise, and you could very much see this one as a direct reboot.
Yeah, and I think with this though, what I want to say is that I knew you're gonna have a good time. I knew it's gonna be action, but it's when them reviews started hitting in. It was positive after positive. I think it was on like 96% of Rotten Tomatoes, but everyone just seemed to love it. I don't know anyone that saw this film and disliked it. It's one of them where really this is kind of like a definition of a summer blockbuster. There's not really a plot, and that's the point. But you've got an hour and a half of almost a car chase. That's literally what it is,
Mm.
and it worked. And I think the fact that practical effects, no one really got tired watching it. They're different areas. It wasn't action fatigue. It wasn't some of the same things over and over. They used different types of cars, all of that. And it's one of them where I sat in the cinema. I loved it the first time, as we've said before in our other podcast. But with this, I think this is growing and growing. I've seen some reviews where they're like, this is the kind of Dark Knight slash Terminator 2 of this decade or something. There's always one, and I completely believe that. I really think it's going to take something special to knock this film off in the next few years.
Yeah, and I mean it's more than doubled its budget, so it'll be interesting to see if we do get a sequel. And I know that there's a few ideas of a sequel floating around, or like a new series. But I do think that this will be a film where, give it like 5 years or more, this will be like a modern cult classic. I think, because I think all the ingredients of it are definitely there for it. You talked about the practical effects and stuff like that, and there is CGI in it, but this could almost be seen as like a lost 80s movie, I think. And so George Miller, I think, was very able to like capture the style that he started with his earlier movies. And I would say that out of all the Mad Max films, this one's the most imaginative and visually stunning of them all. Not just because it was made in 2015, but just like the world building and stuff like that. We talked about that in our review, so I won't go massively in depth. But on all the trailers originally, when it said from the mastermind George Miller, I was like, what, the guy who made the previous Mad Max films, Happy Feet and Babe? But then you see this movie and like all the car designs, weapon designs, people design, costumes, everything like that. You do really get that sense that it is a mastermind. Um, I did really enjoy this film, but I did have problems with it. I discussed this in the review. I think that from an action standpoint and visuals and stuff like that, it was absolutely flawless and I had an absolute blast in the cinema with it. But I do think the characterization and character development was very much lacking in the film. We didn't get all that much with Mad Max, and I would have liked to have seen more with him. But that aside, if you're going into it purely from just an action standpoint and you want a good one, I think this is definitely one of the best action movies we've seen probably in the last 5 years. And it's definitely one of the most sort of, it felt like going on a roller coaster when I saw this in the cinema. I think that will be definitely taken away when it comes out on Blu-ray, because I think a lot of the sort of impact of this movie and the action on screen came from seeing it on a big screen with the surround sound. But it'll be interesting when this is released. I'll buy it, I'll watch it again. But seeing it in 3D, I always said that I wasn't a big fan of 3D, but I think the 3D really worked in this film. It was really immersive, and I just sort of had a big beaming grin on my face the whole way through the movie because it was just that much fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it worked. And again, I don't think anyone thought this would knock off the Avengers, and it did for a few weeks. That you can look at the Avengers takings. Most of it's international. It dropped off in America because Mad Max did really well in America. To be fair to it,
Mm.
but it's another one of them where one of my friends, I think, texted me months ago. He said something like 2015 is the year of unnecessary sequels, and that's kind of one of the first ones on the list I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and as you said, like with Jurassic World, which we'll get onto later, that's another one. and sort of bringing back a big franchise. I think out of the both of them, this one was the most superior. Not just because you had the original director back, but I just think in capturing that tone and the insanity of the first few and ramping it up to the the next degree. And then following this movie, we had Disney's Tomorrowland, which came out. Um, and although this wasn't it's difficult to say if it was a failure or not because it did make its budget back, but I don't know whether it made all of the money on top of that with marketing and stuff like that. It was done on a budget of 190 mil. It made back just under 205, directed by Brad Bird, and I do think this was a real shame because I think Brad Bird is a fantastic director. We see that not just with his animated films like The Iron Giant and The Incredibles, but recently when I rewatched all the Mission Impossible movies, I had no idea that he directed Ghost Protocol, which is many people's favourite Mission Impossible film, at least until the new one came out. I know a lot of people sort of prefer that, I think. But it is a shame because I do think the idea behind the film was there. I think it had all the ingredients to be a success, but I just think that it may have been the story or the timing, or there wasn't that much marketing to get people invested in it. So as such, it was kind of a flop, and it's sort of. I think Disney even came out after this and said that we're not going to do any more live action movies, which I do think is a bit petty because I do think they have the ability to do that, and obviously they've gone against their word with that, with all these sort of live action versions of their animated classics that are coming out. Maybe they mean in terms of live action original films like this one. Um, so it's a weird one. I don't think it was an awful movie. I just think because I was actually kind of on board with it for like the first two acts of the film, I just think it was sort of lost in translation, like with the ending and perhaps the story. Could have done with a few more script rewrites and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I like the fact it was original, and I never mind going to cinema and see something that I hope can be good, and that I know obviously nothing like it, which it was. But again, it was the first two thirds, and it kind of went off board at the end. But it's one of them where I don't know if Disney's told him what he can and can't do because the whole film kind of felt like it was slapping you in the face about like pollution, global warming, and
Hmm.
it was a bit of a shame. But money wise, I think it's sad for the state of cinema when a film like this, granted, I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's brilliant. It's kind of that solid middle ground, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that this will make, say, 200 mil, but if you whack a name of a famous franchise on that 200 will be 500 with the exact same storyline. So it's a bit of a shame they're doing that, and then again they're blaming Tomorrowland for pulling Tron 3, which made no sense to me at all. And you're absolutely spot on about that. Disney, they're happy to do their Cinderellas. Again, they're happy to do their Marvels, their Star Warses, but outside of that, there's almost nothing. Actually, no, there isn't anything there. I saw the release schedule the other day. It's a shame that it's come out the way it has, but I did like it, but I just think, yeah, you're right. It could have done with a few more rewrites and stuff.
Yeah, I just don't think it had a lot of staying power. I mean, as such, it's a film that I'll never probably go out of my way to watch again. Like, if it was on TV and like there was a group of people watching it, like I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's not an awful film. The acting wasn't, bad. I just think that it didn't have that much going for it really, and I think as well, Disney pulled all the merchandise for it, didn't they? Not too long after because they saw that people weren't interested in it. But if we're looking at sort of Disney's track record of live action ones, their recent sort of flop that comes to mind was John Carter, which is a film I still haven't seen. And I remember when trailers came out, it didn't look that bad. But I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, and have seen ones who have seen it and said it's terrible. So I've kind of stayed away from it. I want to say that was the Lone Ranger a Disney movie?
Oh, that bombed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Disney movie. Yeah, that again, you see, that's another one that bombed. Really, all they've got are the franchises that they've had before. So that's why we get another Pirates of the Caribbean movie in 2017, and as I just said, like the live action versions of their pre-existing films that they know are stories that have lasted through the ages and people still are familiar with and enjoy. It's a bit annoying because I'd like to see Disney do some original stuff. I think it's just a case that maybe they aren't marketing it as well as they could be, or maybe they're just stories that don't connect with people and they're not really fussed about. And then after this original film, we get another one that came out not long after. Again, this is one I haven't seen, but I know that you've seen it. We didn't do a review on it because we didn't both see it, but so you can sort of take the stage on this one. This was San Andreas, starring The Rock, made 468 million. So, what were your thoughts on this film then, and how do you think it stacked up to other movies in the summer?
It's one of them where I'm a massive, massive fan of The Rock, so I'll watch almost anything he's in. Which
Mm,
that's ultimate star power. Everyone in wrestling, I think, saw this. Almost anyone in public, I know a lot of people that went to the cinema to see it because it was The Rock. And it's one of them where I'm not really big on disaster films. I find them boring. They're very samey. It's very rare to get
mm.
a good one. And it was just one of them incredibly cliched films where I didn't mind it. I thought it was watchable. I don't think it's particularly good. Um, it's I don't want to sound bad. Because of The Rock, it's watchable. I think if
Yeah.
you'd have put, obviously, look at 2012, that had John Cusack in. If you'd have put John Cusack in this would probably be worse than 2012. It's
Mm.
one of them where The Rock really does save this film, and by saving this film, he also made the company a shitload of money. So it's one of them where I didn't. If you'd have took The Rock out, I think I would have probably really disliked this film. But then again, it just proves that he's great. It was just too cliched, too samey, too oh my god, we're in peril, saved. Oh look, peril, saved. Just one of them where credits The Rock for trying something original that's the same, but it was just one of them where it's like I could have done without seeing it, but I didn't mind it too much. It was watchable, nothing more.
And I think that's the biggest thing that this film had going for it, and you've sort of just summed it up there. When you've got a superstar with that much charisma like The Rock has got, I think it's sort of the modern day equivalent of an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Sylvester Stallone, stuff like that. And we've talked about that before. Many of the films that I love from the 80s are sort of like the big, loud, dumb action movies with the two people I just mentioned. And if you took them out and just put any old average Joe in there, it just would not have worked. So I completely agree with that. Like I haven't been a huge fan of The Rock, but then again, I haven't really seen most of his modern stuff. Really, I think the only film that comes to mind that I've really sat down and watched with him in was The Scorpion King, and that was still very much when his career was in its infancy. But now, he's untouchable. He's in absolutely everything. He's proven that he can resurrect a franchise with G.I. Joe. The first one was terrible, and I'm sure that the second one was still bad. I didn't see the second one, but I know that with him in it, it sort of gave it a bit more clout, I think, than the first one had. Um,
He also saved Fantastic, or not, sorry, not Fantastic, Furious, because they weren't doing well. They brought The Rock in, and
yeah.
it upped everything. And again, he saved that. He saved GI Joe. The not maybe not the definition of saving, but he made it watchable. He's one of them. If you're gonna plant his name on a film, people will come.
Oh, maybe he needed to be in Fantastic Four. Maybe he should have been cast as the Thing or something. That would have made it a bit more enjoyable, I think. But you mentioned like 2012 and stuff, and really that's the reason I just had no enthusiasm to see this film. Visually, it just sort of looked like CGI city destruction and stuff like that. And at this stage, we've just seen it now. When Independence Day came out, the whole destruction of cities and leveling entire worlds and stuff like that was very much new. And that's why I think that film's still iconic, although it's a film I haven't seen. I've seen all the major bits, but now it's just sort of old. It seems like every summer blockbuster that comes out is like a fight in a city where you get like the skyscrapers are being blown up and stuff like that or crumbling, and it just looked more of the same of that, to be honest. Although it just starred The Rock, so maybe this one might be a film that I get round to watching eventually because I do like some of those sort of so bad they're good disaster movies from the 90s like Twister or Dante's Peak and all stuff like that. I really sort of enjoyed those films growing up with them. So this might be a film similar to that. I've heard that it's meant to be okay, it's cliched, but I don't know what else really you could expect from a film like this. So maybe it's enjoyable and it'll probably be one I'll get round to watching much later, but it just wasn't one that had that much enthusiasm to see really.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's most people's take on it. Um, and then I think moving on from San Andreas, we have the Juggernaut and number
Oh yeah.
two on the list of films that no one asked for that were made, which is Jurassic World.
Yep.
Um, I know we've had very different opinions on this, but I think before we go into that, it's like almost crucial to look at the box office records because it kind of came out of nowhere, and we've talked about it in the news where it's just took on every single record, and it's just sort of like beating them down.
Yeah, and I think overall, like what I predicted for this worldwide gross was 700 mil, and it's done, over double that. I think most people who are really good at predicting the box office is said that they're expecting a 200 mil opening weekend, I think, or 150, and it cleared, I want to say, over 500 mil opening weekend, which is absolutely insane, or like the first month or something like that. It made an absolute killing to the point where now it's our third highest grossing movie of all time, which is absolutely insane. Not just for a sequel, but a franchise that's been dead pretty much since 2003. The first one's iconic. It's often on people's list of greatest films of all time. And then the second and third one, I said in our review that the third one I kind of find as an enjoyable 90-minute dinosaur sort of romp through the jungle. But the sequels weren't held up that well, so it must just be dinosaurs because we haven't seen dinosaurs in a movie for ages. So maybe it was that, but then also you look at the actors that we had in there, Chris Pratt in there, straight off Guardians of the Galaxy fame. So really, this film's sort of shaping him to be sort of the next big acting star, and I'm sure he will after this. Bringing him back for the sequel, I believe, as well in 2018. Yeah. So it's really remarkable, I think, that this film did as well as it did. Um, as you said, like we differed on our opinions on the film. I didn't think the film was all that great. I didn't think it captured the magic from the first one. It was an interesting concept to see the park open and stuff like that, but it's just a film that I don't see where it can go for a sequel without it sort of straying into the territory that the Lost World Jurassic Park did. I had a problem with the effects, and I didn't care for any of the characters in it and things like that. And it'll be a film, honestly, I'll probably never go out of my way to see again. I can put the first Jurassic Park in at any point, and I absolutely love that movie. Even sort of with Jurassic Park 3, if it's on the TV and I catch like half of it, something like that. But this is it's just a film I didn't really have all that much love for, really. But everyone else must have, because yeah, it made that much, so people love dinosaurs.
Yeah, I think with this, I had a really, really good time. But then again, I just kind of wanted to see dinosaurs, and I think that's the same reason why 99% of people have seen it. Because I think also when they were hearing about it, they were all right reviews. I think late 60s, early 70s on Rotten Tomatoes, people were saying, "Oh, it's meant to be fun. Oh, it's got dinosaurs. We'll go see it." And there's just all that talk. And then I think when the money started pouring in, that got people's attention. Similar to Avatar, we go, "Okay, everyone's seen this, so we're gonna have to go and see what the fuss is about." I mean, because that's why I went with my sisters and my dad. Like, rarely four of us go to the cinema. And obviously, when Star Wars, I'd have all five of the family out, which is going to be a massive deal. But
Mm.
it's one of them where I had a good time watching it, and I think it was a lot of nostalgia power. But I think you're right. It was the lack of dinosaurs why people saw it. But the downside of that is, if you make a film with dinosaurs, then it's just going to be called a Jurassic Park ripoff, whatever you make these days. So it's kind of holding its own as a franchise. But again, I was just shocked at the money it made, and I think it's got to be the dinosaur power, and maybe Chris Pratt, because a lot of kids really like Star Lord. So
Mm.
whether that dragged him along, I don't know. But I also like the fact it was a bit darker than I thought it would be. But
Yeah.
you're right about the sequel stuff there. I don't know what they're gonna do, and I really hope that the sort of military crossover human dinosaur nonsense is got rid of,
Oh.
because obviously Colin Trevorrow came in. He came in to the film. It was his idea to have the park open. He didn't want the military stuff. The thing is, okay, it's worked for him, but now he's gone off doing Star Wars. Are they
Yeah.
gonna hire in some guy that would take the studio's orders, like a Mark Webb, Josh Trank? I don't know. But it's going to be one of them. It'll be interesting what the sequel does, whether or not it's good. And then again, I think this is going to have Avengers syndrome. The next Jurassic World is not going to make more than this, because this was almost an event film.
Yeah, I think the novelty is definitely going to wear off, especially if they do go the whole route of the military and stuff like that. I guess it depends which director they do eventually end up getting. But a minute ago, the point you made is an excellent point about that. This was a film where the whole family could go and see it. This was bringing in fans of the original. It was bringing in fans of just dinosaurs. Like really little kids even love dinosaurs. So although there's like violence in it and stuff like that, I think it's still a film they'd get a kick out of just seeing the dinosaurs on the screen. You've got a sort of teenage kids as well who love it, as well as it's a film that the parents can go to and not sort of roll their eyes and fall asleep at because there's still something in it for them. And as you said, like I think that's what Star Wars is going to have in December as well. So I'm sure that Star Wars, even more so, is going to make way more than this, not just because of that, but it's also got the big fan base around it as well, so that'll get even in multiple viewings from that angle. But yeah, Jurassic World, huge surprise, cleared the billion mark, and the next film on the list as well is it's shaping up to be a film that will definitely probably clear over the billion mark. That's Minions. It's a film that I haven't seen. I know you haven't seen it either, but we could just sort of look at what it's made and all that stuff. I've never seen the first two Despicable Me movies, so I have no knowledge of this franchise, but I know that the Minions are really popular. You see them absolutely everywhere, just all over the place. So I think it was really a smart move on on their part to make a movie just based on the Minions. Um, I've seen quite a few mixed reviews on it though. I know that some fans of Despicable Me don't find it as good as those movies and stuff like that. But I mean, you can't argue with currently 960 million, and it still has to open in China. I think you said, didn't you, or somewhere?
Yeah, it's basically it's going to clear a billion, which a few people predicted. I think I, I knew it was going to be very high up because the Despicable Me 2 made a lot of money, and I think with Minions, with that, it's because a lot of people love them. It's whether or not these fatigue have come in because they're by far the best thing about the first two Despicable Me films. But I think they work well as supporting characters, not the
Yeah,
leads. And it's almost a bit like Jurassic World 2. I'm sorry, not Jurassic World, Jurassic Park 2, where you kind of get too much of. I've
of a good
forgotten.
thing.
Yeah,
Like too much of a good thing. Yeah.
and it's one of them where I'll be interested to see it because I know a lot of people that did like it, and I think it just comes down to personal preference. But it's one I'll probably catch if it's on TV or if I buy it or something. But it's not the sort of film I'd rush to the cinema for, especially the way I saw it Inside Out with a lot of children. I don't really want to do that again because they're doing my head in. They'd be more annoying than the Minions, to be fair.
I tell you what, that's going to be absolute hell when Pixar brings out all their next load of films. Like, I've got to see Dory, I've got to see Incredibles 2, I'll begrudgingly see Toy Story 4, so like all those movies. And then Good Dinosaur as well at the end of this year, so we're still going to be there for that. But with Minions, I completely agree with that. To be honest, I've always found them really annoying, even though I haven't seen the movies. But, I can get why some people like them, and how you said, like, too much of a good thing. That's honestly my biggest concern with Finding Dory that's coming out. I think this is just going on a tangent now, but I think that Dory works when she's a supporting character, she's a sidekick to Marlin's character, and I don't know how well it's gonna be. And I think the charm will wear off really quickly when she's in the lead role. I hope that's not the case, and but people still love Minions. We'll probably get a Minions 2. We might even get a Despicable Me 3. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, so yeah, that's going to be another one without doubt to clear over the billion. And it's usually these animated films that do, get that high level of recognition and bring in loads at the box office. They're still really, really popular. And then we'll move on to our next film, really, which came out, big sort of summer blockbuster, which was Terminator Genesis. This is the first time I actually saw how much it made overall. I thought it would have made a bit less than this. It made 324 mil, which I don't think is really that bad. I'm not quite sure what the budget was. I'll check that in a minute when you bring up your point. But I've gone on record before. I hated this movie. Some of the ideas they posed could have been interesting, but we knew that. I think we both knew that this was going to be bad news just from the trailer. Huge Terminator fan. Obviously, more so the first two, but there's even sort of a weird, sick part of me that enjoys three and Salvation. But I just think this movie was trash. It was spoiled in the trailers, the acting, and even me. Like, I'm a huge Arnie fan. I'll go and see all his new movies that come out because I like supporting his work. But even he looked tired in this. There was just nothing in it for me. It's sequel baits. It really wants to try and get a franchise of this, but like Fantastic Four, which we'll talk about later, I think you brought this point up to me. I wasn't aware of this, that this movie was just made purely because they've got a few years left on the rights. I think they're going to try and rush out a second and third one as part of this trilogy before 2019. I think they're filming the second and third one back to back just before the rights go back to James Cameron, who, let's be honest, probably won't do anything with the Terminator franchise once he gets the rights back. He's sort of caught up with Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many bloody Avatar movies he's going to bring out. So again, it's one of those films that have sort of made out of necessity, which often really don't result in a good product, which is what happened here.
Yeah, and this is I despise this film. I like the first two Terminators. I'm not massive on the franchise, but it's one of them where I remember seeing it and I was just angry, and I sort of like the fact that they kind of the best bit about the film is them doing the sort of Terminator One stuff, but I don't like the fact that they redo that Terminator One to stuff. Someone that I just wish this crashed and burned. However, it's unfortunately actually done well. I think I read somewhere that most of it was international again.
Yeah.
Probably China, I'm guessing, because they probably haven't seen the originals or something. It just seems an absolute mess, and I don't like the fact that this is actually done well for itself, and it's actually made almost more than the next film we'll be talking about. But it's just one of them where the cast didn't work. Arnie, you're right, looks tired. He looks bored. He's chiming in. I think he thought he needed a hit because he's not box office anymore. But you know, I really don't want them to do this second and third, but unfortunately they will do.
And it's not the fact that it's Arnie, because a lot of people are saying now, even with Stallone, I don't know if this is true, so I have nothing to back this up with, but I heard that Stallone, after he does sort of, this Creed movie, passes on the mantle to Michael B. Jordan, and then he's doing Rambo Last Blood as well. I think there's rumours that he might just sort of be hanging it up after that and retiring. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think it's the case that Arnie's bad. I think he's still got star power and all of that. I think it's literally just because all the movies he's been in, really since his return, have been bad. With exception to Escape Plan, because I actually think that movie was really good. That's the movie he was in with Stallone. I really enjoyed that movie, so I don't think it's his fault. I think that they're just bad movies they're in. And the reason that Terminator franchise is in a bad way, well, it was. I don't know if it is now so much. Is because they're making bad Terminator movies. Like, if you got a director on this, sort of like the director of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, who's really passionate about the franchise, the characters, and all stuff like that, I do think you could get another good one out of it. I've checked here. The budget was 155 mil, and as we said, it made 324. And the director as well, Alan Taylor, worked on Game of Thrones. It did feel very much like a made-for-TV movie. I think it didn't. The action didn't wow me or anything like that. It was very formulaic, and it's going to be bad when the director of the original two sort of comes out and makes like an impassioned plea to get people to see it, because he sees this as the true third one in the franchise, just to try and get more people into the cinema and give it a bit more credibility. I really didn't care for that. I know we both hated this movie, so we'll move on to our next one. As you said, almost made as much as the following movie, Marvel's Ant-Man. I think probably one of the big reasons that Ant-Man, I don't want to say it didn't do well, because I mean, as you said before we started recording, we should have probably expected it to make this much. It was a property outside of the comic book world that many people don't know. The name himself, the concept of him is very, very ridiculous, probably even more ridiculous than Guardians of the Galaxy. So we knew it wasn't going to make as much as Avengers or Captain America, like pre-established ones like that. But I think it still did all right, and I know a lot of people that did go and see it enjoyed it. I, for one, really enjoyed it, and actually, it was probably my biggest surprise movie of the summer. Really, I saw trailers. I really wasn't that enthusiastic. It looked really sort of cliched. The humor looked bad, and I just really didn't care for it. And I thought this was going to be Marvel's first big misstep. But I went to see it. I didn't go in. I went in with an open mind, but I wasn't expecting to like it. And I came out. It was a really, really fun movie, and I had a really good time at it. And I think a lot of people did that went to see it. Um, so yeah, it's a bit of a shame that it didn't make a little bit more than this, because I think it deserved it, and I think all the elements were there for it to make more than this. But I think that's to be expected, and who knows, like if they do a Ant-Man 2, or I'm not really sure what the future is with the Ant-Man property, like after Avengers 3 and stuff like that. But I think if audiences seeing more in a Civil War, which comes out next year, I think maybe the sequel will do better or stuff like that, or maybe they'll just keep Ant Man within the Avengers sort of group and won't do another sort of solo movie with him.
Yeah, I think it's a shame because leading into it, I was a bit mixed. I was pretty upset that Edgar Wright got taken off. There was a lot
Yeah.
of things that I weren't looking forward to, and then the reviews came in, and most of the reviews were kind of saying that it's actually good. So I went in the cinema a bit open-minded, a bit wary, and I had a great time watching it. And you're right, it was a complete surprise because I didn't think it thought it'd be fun, but I didn't think it'd be like good as it was. That it's actually well made, it's well directed, and it works well. And you're right about the franchise. I really hope in Civil War that we know he's going to have a scene or two. Obviously he's one of the main guys, but I really hope that he might be Quicksilver for it and become like a show stealer or something because he's got all the potential in the world to do that. But it was just a shame that this hasn't made more money. But the way I see it now is that if you look at the sort of Phase One Marvel films, except Iron Man, a few of them made say 400s, 500s, but there weren't ever 600s, 700s that weren't Iron Man films. So it's one of them where I think because Marvel's done so well and we've all been so into it, it's just one of them where maybe it's bringing us back to reality or something that your Doctor Stranges will probably make money, but that's more Benedict Cumberbatch. But it's one of them where these films we've kind of got to forget that there's almost no audience and people will laugh at the fact who half these characters are.
Yeah, and with this movie as well, I think it did almost benefit from being a small scale movie. And I mean, one of the weakest points probably of the movie is the actual story and plot itself. It is very much almost beat for beat exactly the same as the original Iron Man movie. Um, but I think that it works for the character being a smaller scale. It's sort of a nice introduction to the character, and as I said, it'll be interesting to see what they do with the character. I think maybe one of the reasons as well it didn't make all as much as it could was the marketing. Like I saw the marketing ramp up like a week before the movie came out, but all of Marvel's power was on marketing the hell out of Avengers: Age of Ultron, and then I think this came out, was it 2 or 3 months after that? Um, but we really didn't see anything. We didn't get all that many trailers for it, really. Certainly not as much as Avengers, which is to be expected, I guess. But I think they should have ramped it up a little bit more, get a bit more people talking about it. We saw the posters come out; they were really, really trying to get people to see this with putting the familiar images of Iron Man and Captain America and Thor with a little Ant Man on top of all the stuff. Um, so I think maybe that was a reason as well. It didn't do as well as it could have done. I think there wasn't enough buzz around it, but it's nice to see that it made that much, and I know a lot of people like it, so maybe now it's in people's minds, they'll be more open to another one that comes out. And then we'll move on to our next film, another animated one. We got this a couple of months after the US, surprise, surprise. This was Pixar's Inside Out. It's currently made 667 million, which is really good. I'm not sure if it's as good as some other Pixar movies have done, which is a little strange. But when this was originally came out, I think this came out not too long, or like a week or two after Jurassic World was released. So I do think definitely Jurassic World ate a lot of what this movie could have made. But I mean, still a fantastic result for Pixar, and I know a lot of people that have seen it absolutely adore this movie.
Yeah, and I'm happy it's made so much because it's not a risk as such, but if you look at it in a sense that if you show a kid this, they might not understand half of it, and like the adults, it's a
Yeah.
very grown-up Pixar film, and although yes, it's very child-friendly, it's not as easy for them to understand as something like Monsters Inc. or Toy Story. It's kind of in that sort of Wall-E territory where it's very different, and it pays off. It's one of the best films I've seen in a long time. It's one of Pixar's strongest films, and the money it's making is a fair enough comeback to that. I think a lot of older people will go to the cinema and appreciate what this film is trying to do. But also, it was just fantastic. I had a great time watching it, and I'm happy. And again, no one expected Jurassic World to be the hit what it was, and I think it was Jurassic World's second weekend, which is when Inside Out came out, and they were almost neck and neck. I think it was something like 60 and like 55 or something, where normally, take out Jurassic World and that Pixar's probably going to make 70, 75 minimum.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you were talking about like being more adult and stuff, and I definitely agree with that. And I think this was Pixar's return to form because I've said in our review and I've said it before that I think Pixar over the last couple of years have had a lot of missteps. I don't think they've really brought out a decent, truly good on like Pixar level movie since 2010's Toy Story 3, and I think that this was a worthy sort of successor in their line of movies. I love when Pixar make original films, and I do think that it's a little bit of a shame that after Good Dinosaur at the end of this year, we are going to get like another, what was it, like three or four sequels to to previous Pixar films. I would very much like to see them bring out new content each time, maybe with a sequel sprinkled here and there. But I mean, I could really do without, sorry, the likes of a Cars 3, for example. But no, I absolutely fell in love with this movie. I think that the messages in the film cater very much to a teenage or adult audience, but then you've got your colourful characters in there and like a few funny gags in there for like the kids and stuff like that. I'll totally agree with you though. This was one of the most awkward cinema going experiences I've had in a long time. Like it was really awkward. I was besides parents, like I was just sort of there on my own. I picked like an aisle seat. I just felt really uncomfortable the whole movie. And then when you see like the trailers and stuff for like other stuff, you're like, oh god, why am I here? But I think that's the power of Pixar, like because it does. They are such a good animation studio that they do have material in their films that cater to a wide audience. And then our next movie that came out after this, a film that it was the first film in the franchise of this series that I saw on the big screen, and that was Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. We reviewed all the previous four movies. I'd never seen them before, but I wanted to sit down and get round to them before this one came out. Um, but I mean, this was a fantastic film, and I haven't been to see it multiple times. I only saw it the once, but it's a film that's still in my mind that I'd really like to see it again, and I can't wait till it's released on DVD and Blu-ray because this will definitely be one I pick up, and I'll probably pick up like a box set of the previous ones as well. Um, like the scenes in there, like I don't want to spoil anything, but that opera scene, like I need to see that scene again. So there's all bits of it like that, and it was a big surprise for me. I sort of knew what I was getting into because we watched the previous four. It's made 375 mil, which I'll check in a minute once you're giving your point how much the previous ones made. So I don't know if it's sort of on par with what they make or if it's made a little bit under. But I think it just still showcases what a true like action star and great actor Tom Cruise is. New director as well, but I think he still did justice to the series. And I think that this arguably could be seen as sort of the Skyfall of the Mission Impossible franchise, because I do think where it leaves off is an interesting place of where the series can unfold to.
Yeah, and I think quickly money wise, I think Ghost Protocol is the highest grossing with about 475, and I think this was on about 375 when we started recording. So it's one of them. It's going to grow and grow. It might not gross as much as four, but the other thing with the odd ones, they had winter release dates with no blockbusters, whereas this is in the
Yeah.
middle of summer season. But I had a great time watching this. The minute this sort of stunt was revealed with the aeroplane when they were filming, I was kind of like, whoa, this is going to be good. And it was. It was better than I thought it would be, which is very good because although I was looking forward to it, you know, when you're seeing the amazing trailers that are full of action, be away from the action, it had a compelling villain. There was a lot of good stuff going for it. I had a great time watching this, and it's definitely been one of the standouts I think of this summer. And again, you know, Tom Cruise kicking ass at the age of 54. They've given us a sick one a lot quicker than the previous film, so you know, I'm sure he's got his plan. I think he wants to keep doing these until he gets to the day where he's probably too old to do the stunts. But so on there, this is undeniably great, and it's going to keep making more money.
Yeah, and I'd like to see them bring a sixth one out really quickly. I mean, they may as well strike while the iron's hot, really, not just because of Tom Cruise getting older and stuff like that, but I think that the audience is still there for it. It may not have made as much as the fourth one, but I think that people still really enjoy this franchise. And that was a great point you made about that it was originally going to come out in December. I completely forgot about that. So, I mean, power to the studio or the director and all the people involved for being able to get it ready to the standard of this way ahead of time, like what, 5 months ahead of time. So that really speaks to their talent to get it done. There are a few maybe effect shots in the film, although there's not that many special effects, but there's bits which maybe aren't as fine tuned as they could have been if it had come out in December. But I mean, it would have been absolute financial suicide if this came out along Star Wars. So I think it was definitely smart to move it forward. And it's not very often that you get a film that moves forward, especially to this scale. Most studios would say like, "Oh, we'll push it back to the following year." But yeah, absolutely love it. One of my favourite films of the year so far, I think. And it's nice that I've actually finally got on board with the Mission Impossible franchise. And I kind of did with 4 anyway, with Ghost Protocol. But Rogue Nation's just sort of cemented that, and I'll definitely go and see all the future ones that are released. Um, and then we'll move on to another film. I haven't seen this one yet. To be honest, the reviews put me off. Although when the trailers came out, I was completely sold on the director and the premise of the movie. You've since seen this, so we haven't done a podcast on this before, so I'm going to let you just talk about this one a bit. Pixels, directed by Chris Columbus. It's currently made 160 mil. Widely regarded as a terrible movie. Everyone seems to be hating it, but I know that you've got slightly different opinion on it than most people.
Yeah, and I think when this film was announced, I was so excited. I was looking forward to it. These proper retro games and all that. Then when the trailers came out, I wasn't put off, but it's tough with Adam Sandler because I watch an Adam Sandler film because with comedies, critics is a very hard thing. It's always with the individual.
Yeah,
And when I was looking at some of these reviews going into it, it was all I hate Adam Sandler, I hate Kevin James, I hate Adam Sandler. Oh, I don't like video games. It was one of them where it must be hard for a critic to watch this film that doesn't like any of it. So when I saw it, I went in with low expectations, but I had a good time. I mean, I laughed a lot there. Granted, the way I see it is that although it's an Adam Sandler film, he's not there making noises the whole film's like Grown Ups. Kevin James isn't complete fat jokes like Grown Ups and his other stuff. It was one of them where they're the secondary characters to the video game stuff, and I had a great time watching it. I laughed a lot, I'll admit it now. I completely understand where everyone comes from. Where Adam Sandler, he's still Adam Sandler in it, but he's not as, what would I say, let off the lead as he is in his own films.
yeah.
But I had a good time watching it, and there's some great moments, there are some poor moments, but I think it was genuinely a solid blockbuster. And maybe if you'd have had a different cast, it could have done better. But it was one of them where still you had sorry, not Tyrion Lannister.
Peter
Yeah,
Dinklage.
you had Peter Dinklage,
Yeah.
who is one of the standouts by a country mile, and I had a great time watching this, and I don't regret going. Although it was free tickets anyway, it was
Yeah.
still one of them where if I'd have paid, I wouldn't have minded.
Yeah, it's one of those films where it'll probably definitely be one I check out when it comes out on DVD. I don't think I could justify going to see it in the cinema. I don't know whether I'd enjoy it all that much, but I never know. I'm kind of notorious for liking really, really dumb comedies, like the old scary movie films like 1 to 3. I know a lot of people hated those, but like I love those kind of movies, so I don't usually agree with many reviews and stuff on comedies until I see them myself. But just the premise alone and like the whole video game stuff looks so much fun, and I know it plays on a lot of nostalgia and stuff like that. But just how they brought these video game characters to life on the big screen, and they're like, they're destroying the city. All the stuff with Pac-Man I thought looked hilarious in the thing where there's a shot in the trailer where like loads of the civilians are running away, and you just see this big Pac-Man shadow like up against the skyscraper. It looks like a sort of Godzilla moment almost. And you're completely right with Peter Dinklage. He looked like he was the strongest thing in the movie. I think this was a film that definitely could have benefited from maybe a younger cast, sort of like a group of like 20 somethings like who are big like video game fanatics. But then again, the concept of the movie is these old video game characters from the 80s, so it stands to reason that you'd have an older cast. um but it's one I'd like to check out, and I completely agree with that. That I think a lot of critics sort of just got hung up on the whole Kevin James and Adam Sandler thing. Like it seems like they'll never forgive him for all his past movies, and I mean that's fair enough. But I think you do have to like judge the film on its own without going into it with all that baggage from like the previous movies they've done. If you still don't like their comedy or their acting in this movie, that's fine. But it seemed like people were just sort of going in automatically with a bad attitude just from the films that they'd made before this, and didn't judge this as a film on its own, perhaps as much as they could have done.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right with that, and I think this is the individual again that a lot of people would probably watch this that have been put off by critics, and they might like it, they might not. I'm completely fine with that, but it's tough one with comedies. I've always said it. Like Trainwreck's got amazing reviews. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to. But then again, Bridesmaid had amazing reviews, and I think it's one of the worst comedies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie actually. I know that a lot of people liked it, but even from trailers, that was one that just didn't do anything for me. Um, I don't know if it's a shame with Pixels really, because when the initial concept was released before the name had come out and it was just sort of the treatment of like what the plot was going to be about, I instantly fell in love with it. I thought it was a really smart idea for it. May have been slightly lost in translation with the cast and stuff like that, but I think that I haven't seen it, so maybe it could be terrible. But I'm just going purely from like just seeing the trailers and stuff like that, and sort of what you've said at the minute. I do think that there are redeeming qualities to it than perhaps a lot of people are saying. And then we really end on the film that's more or less unofficially capped off the entire summer movie season, very sort of unceremoniously, and that was with Fantastic Four. Um, we've spoken at nauseum about this film. I know that a lot of other people have. Thankfully, the news seems to have let up a little bit about it now, because I know that you almost went on a bit of a rant one time saying like, "Yes, we know it's bad. Move on from it. Like, don't keep going on about it." So we won't go into loads of details. But I think everyone knows at this point how bad the film is. It was done on a budget of 120 mil. It's currently made 103, so I don't see it making its budget back at all. I believe it's been released in all territories at this moment. If it hasn't, then it might just barely scrape it back. But this movie, I saw posters on the side of buses, on billboards. This movie was everywhere. I was seeing like TV spots and trailers for it every single second on the TV. So I think a lot of the money of this film also went into marketing, which it's not going to make back. It was just a flawed movie from the off, really. I think the concept that Trank pitched them wasn't right for Fantastic Four in the first place, but for some reason Fox still went along with it. So I think there's faults on both sides. We've seen B-roll footage, which you sent me a link to, which showed the Fantasticar was in there originally. Lot of stuff was cut. It was just absolutely just flawed from every single conceivable angle, all the way through the production to the finished project. Finished product, I think.
Yeah, and the whole thing's a mess. And you know what? I'd much rather summer blockbuster season ends with a horrific film, you
Yeah,
know,
it makes
because
you remember the good, doesn't it?
exactly. And you know, I was originally against this film anyway because I knew they only made it to keep their rights, and it was a mess. And I don't sound nasty. I'm not happy it's shit, but I'm just not bothered by it. I mean, you know, it's a mess. It's not. It's gonna barely scrape its budget back, let alone marketing, and it's probably gonna contribute to ruining Josh Trank's blockbuster career. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm more excited for the court case than the actual sequel, so it's gonna be one of them where you know don't make another one. Let Marvel have the rights back. But then again, I'm just so put off seeing it. But you're right, it's a mess of a film, and it's arguably the worst of the year so far, and that's because of how poor it was. And you know, I don't understand for a company like Fox to have been given away how poor like a version of it is. You know, give it to someone that's got a good story. They clearly just gave it to the first person they came across.
Yeah, and it's really bizarre. Like with Marvel, Marvel has sort of hit their stride really with comic book movies, and if they ever like rushed out a movie just because it's got to get made, I don't even think they'd entertain that idea or ever even do that, because they're passionate about their products. Obviously, they want them to make money and stuff, but I think they'd know that if they rushed it out, it wouldn't be as good, and it would probably like cast a huge shadow over their company and make people really worried about their future products. So it really sort of confuses me with Fox why they did this. They may as well have just took the hit, let the rights revert back, because they knew that audiences weren't really enthusiastic in it anyway. And I don't know if the rights reverting back, if Disney has to pay Fox money to get the rights back, or if they just automatically go back. I'm not really sure how like the business side of that thing works, but it's really weird. Like you look at Fox's original movies, and maybe with the exception of like the first couple of X-Men movies, they've just been really bad. And then it seemed like when First Class came around, um, and then Days of Future Past, and now with the looks of Deadpool, it looks like they've really sort of like found their place in the comic book world. Like a lot of people just want all the characters to go back to Marvel, and that's fair enough if you feel that way. But I think that X-Men certainly has a safe home now with Fox. I think they know exactly what they're doing with that, although along the way there have been a lot of missteps. And I think that Deadpool looks like it's in safe hands as well, what we've seen with the marketing. And although we didn't completely 100% love the trailer, I think the tone and the character of Deadpool's totally there. So it's really weird when they are this inconsistent and then they bring this out. Maybe it's a case that the Fantastic Four are sort of a group of superheroes that no one cares about anyway, regardless of how you try and put them on screen. But I think like with X Men and stuff, when they had like Matthew Vaughn in and then brought Brian Singer in, they know their world, they know those characters, and Matthew Vaughn as well with another movie that came out this year. We haven't put it in the countdown because it wasn't a summer movie, but Kingsman. He is really sort of just a fantastic filmmaker, and he's definitely one of the directors to watch like in modern times. So I think this was just a case that the director they got really sort of had like a muddled idea for it. It wasn't the right direction they should have gone for the series, but for some reason they just decided to go with it because they were, with the strapped for time, with the rights going back. It was just an absolute mess. I don't think we really need to talk about it anymore. We knew it was going to be bad. It did turn out bad. I think it's currently on like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. Everyone hates it. Let's just move on and hopefully in probably like 10 years, Fantastic Four gets another shot. Hopefully, by then, the rights have gone back to Marvel or something's happened where we can get the characters, done properly this time. So, before we're going to give like a sort of top three of our favourite movies of the year. I guess I'll just ask you what you think the biggest surprise of the year was. I've said that mine was Ant Man. So what was your one? What was the film that you went in thinking this is going to be crap or I might not like this, and you come out the cinema genuinely shocked that you enjoyed it or it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be?
I've kind of got two in all honesty. The first one was Pixels because, as I said, I went in with the lowest of the low expectations. Didn't expect to laugh, but I had a really good time doing it. So, to some degree, that surprised me entirely. But I think Jurassic World is kind of another one where I thought it'd be all right at that. Uh, I wasn't too keen on that second trailer and stuff, but I had a great time watching it. So it's kind of split between those two. But I think in order of surprise level, Pixels kind of just takes it away because I thought it'd be a shit bomb like everyone said. But you know what? I had a good time, and I'll happily tell people that if you like video games, and you might like this film, you might not. But again, I just didn't expect it to be anything, and it was to me. So I think that takes it for me.
Yeah, and if anything, you've made me more enthusiastic to see the movie. Like I was gonna go and see it. I was all geared up to go and see it. All the reviews came out, sort of like put me off, but I'm definitely interested to see it at some point, probably when the DVD comes out. So now we'll just say what we thought was the best movie of the summer or best movies. I think we both got a top three. We won't have to talk about them loads. Obviously we did all reviews on them anyway. We've just talked about them now. Maybe just a sentence or something of why. Yeah, just leave it at like one sentence or something. Why it's in your countdown, stuff like that. So, do you just want to list off your three, or do you want to take it in turns? Your three, my three, onwards.
I'll just do my quick three 'cause it's only a minute. It's more or
Yeah,
less. I got Inside Out at third. Thought it was great. A kind of beautiful film, if you can say. Return to form on Pixar. Had a great time watching it. I think a lot of other people will do. Second, Mission Impossible. Great fun, great action, great stunts. I want to see more, and thankfully we're going to get that. I want to know how they up the stakes, but again, Tom Cruise on almighty form. And you're right, without spoilers, there is the opera scene. But
yeah.
first up for me, it's going to be pretty hard for Star Wars to beat this. I'm thinking it's Mad Max because that film was just unbelievable. And the more I think about it, the more I want to see it again. It's out on digital release in America, and I'm there like, why can't they give it us early for a change? I don't want to wait till October to see it again, but I'll happily do it because I had a blast watching it. And I think the more I see that film, the more I love it.
And you've got like the absolute awesome Ultimate Edition pre-ordered, haven't you? Which comes with the figure of the car.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can't wait for that, and I want to see the documentaries as well on it because the making of this is like its own film, if you know what I mean. 15 years.
Oh yeah, and I definitely need to start sitting down and watching like behind the scenes stuff. When I buy a film, I tend to pretty much just watch the film and that's it. But this is one I definitely want to see George Miller in that desert and how they managed to pull off some of this stuff because it was incredible. My top three, at number three, I have Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. Again, it was a franchise I was very much new to. Sort of like the week before this came out, I caught up with all the other ones. And I just had an absolute blast with it. I'm not huge on the spy espionage type films. I've said that before, but this one just did something with me. It was tense. The opera scene, the underwater scene, so many things from it I can remember, and I'm really dying to see this film again. Really, really strong addition to the series. My number two is actually Mad Max Fury Road, although I have a lot of problems with it in terms of character and stuff. If you're looking at it purely from just an action set piece, it's one of the finest filmed and created action movies I think I've ever seen. Had an absolute blast at the cinema, and I can't wait to see it again when it's released. And my number one is actually Inside Out. I knew that I was gonna go into like a return to form for Pixar. Just from the trailer that came out, I thought the concept was really interesting and a film that I was, although the trailer very much was like a short film in itself, I wanted to see how they'd maintain that and keep it up for an entire movie. And just from like the opening scene of the movie where you're whisked into this world and all the rules they lay out, all the different emotions, and it's I just loved everything about it, all the characters, all the sort of nuances and intricacies of the world. I thought it was fantastic. So currently, Inside Out's my favourite movie I've seen, probably seen of the year. Also, if we're doing like a list of all movies that have come out this year, I think Kingsman are definitely getting my list. But as we said, this is just a discussion of the summer movie releases. So that's pretty much our discussion on it. Now we're going to go into film fights. How film fights works is that each week we pit some like characters or films or situations or whatever against each other in a fun little what if fight that relates to what we've reviewed in the show. So today's obviously been a discussion of the summer movie season, so our film fights is going to be a bit of an interesting one this week. Which would we rather watch? Terminator Genesis versus Fantastic Four. I think I could go on record and say that these are both of our least favourite films that have come out of this year so far. So if you basically had a gun to your head and said you've got to sit down and watch one of these movies this afternoon, which one would you pick to watch? George, kick us off. Which one would you go for?
I think I'll go for Fantastic Four. I think mainly because obviously I like these sort of comic book films, but with these, you know, there's a cast where I can watch a horrible film like this, and how am I going to make up for it? I'm going to put Whiplash on, or I'm going to put Creed on, or Fruitvale Station, or Chronicle to the director's achievements. It's a film that's so bad you want to look at the good from it, but also there's a 40-minute stint where it's alright and it's watchable. It just derails itself completely, but as horrific as it is, it doesn't start as bad as that.
See, I've been trying to think, like, I'm looking at the running times now. Terminator Genesis sits at 126 minutes, while Fantastic Four is only at 100 minutes, so it is a lot shorter. But I'm thinking out of the two, if I had to watch one again, if I was forced to see one again, it would probably be Terminator Genesis. Now, I know that Fantastic Four, although it's really bad and it's just a mess of a film, it's sort of just, it's formulaic, like you know where it's going. It's sort of an easy watch. They're not characters that I particularly care about, so it's sort of harmless in that regard. Now if I was a huge Fantastic Four fan, then oh god, I just hate this movie. And I do hate this movie, but it's for different reasons. It's just for like how it was made and how shoddily it was put together. But with Terminator Genesis, as bad as it is, and it is really, really bad, it still has Arnold in there, so it has somewhat like an enjoyable quality about it. And like the first 15 minutes of the movie, if I squint my eyes really tight, I can pretend that I'm watching the first Terminator film.
But the thing with that, you'll be watching it and like, Terminator 1, but it's not. And that's the thing. If I were to watch that, I'd be so desperate to find Terminator 1 somewhere, find Terminator 2 somewhere. I just couldn't bear to watch it. I mean, with Fantastic Four, okay, I'd be watching, like, I want to see the old ones, but I don't mind the first 34 minutes of it. It's watchable and the other people have got catalogues, but I just think with Terminator, you're right, it's too long and it's Jai Courtney. I mean, I've met the Reese and he's a fucking dickhead. I can finally
Oh
say
yeah.
that. But you know, he's better than Jai Courtney still, and it's just one of them where that tears apart Terminator, and you might as well get rid and pretend it never happened, because we might have to have a shit Fantastic Four to get us a good one in the future, rather than a shit Terminator film, which is going to be carried on by 2 more shit ones, I'm betting.
I'm just trying to think on level of enjoyment here. Now, both are like completely just like absolute no enjoyment whatsoever. But if I'm going to break it down, there's just absolutely nothing in Fantastic Four. I didn't feel anything. It was like I was in the cinema for Man of Steel again. It was just like a vacuous 100 minutes of nothing. I just get up and leave. I'm not angry. I'm not disappointed. I'm not happy. I just can't feel anything. Whereas Terminator Genesis, I at least had a reaction to it. And enjoyment-wise, like, I get to see Arnold. When the credits hit, I get to hear the Terminator theme again. So, just for those 2 reasons alone, it'd probably be Terminator Genesis. And then after, like, the film's finished, like, probably just, like, cry in a dark corner or something, because they're both that bad.
I think I'll make a final point, but I think I've got to give it to Terminator, 'cause I probably would. But it's so sad that Fantastic Four genuinely has the better Terminator and is more violent than Terminator Genesis. When Doctor Doom comes out,
That's true.
you know, that's a Terminator film right there, and that's 12A. Whereas you've got this tame thing where it's kind of like, oh, let's waddle along. So I think I'd give it to Terminator Genesis, but the real Terminator is Victor Von Doom. Sorry, Victor Domashev.
That's a really good point, and that scene is probably the best scene in that movie. But that scene's like what, a minute long. I've got to sit here for like just under 2 hours or 2 hours exactly for either one. I'm gonna go Terminator. You're gonna go Fantastic Four. So we're at a draw here, but I think we can both find common ground in that both of these films are just terrible. Both of them.
No one watched them.
Yeah, exactly. The worst 2 films of the year by far. So now we're going to move into our final segment before we like peace out on this main show today, which is recommended movie. How recommended movie works is that each week we both nominate a film to review for our film club show on Thursday, which vaguely ties into whatever we review in the main show. Today has been our rundown of the summer movie season, so it's kind of a weird category to like go off this week. It's your pick this week to choose something, so I'm interested to see what you pick this week, because just purely based on the link alone. So let us know what you've recommended and a few reasons why you've picked it.
Well, you've got 40 years of blockbuster films, so in all honesty, finding a film was easy but hard. But I found one thing. However, I'm going to offer you something that hasn't been done. I was going to offer you a trade for this week for next week, because I've got an idea for a film. But it's unless you've got one, it's never been done before. But it's if you want to trade films for a week.
Trade films for a week in that...
You do the film club after. No, you do this film club and I take the next. It's an interesting trade. Because I've got a film, but it's whether or not you'd want to watch it, if you know what I mean. Do you want me to say the film?
Yeah, go for the film and then I'll see, because then I'll be sort of have to try and think on my feet last minute as to pick one. But
right.
Yeah, go for it.
The one I came up with is that neither of us have seen.
Okay.
And I thought about this. I got it a few days ago, but you actually brought it up earlier. It's Independence Day.
Okay.
But I was thinking that unless you want to trade for one, because I know it's actually a hard trade. Originally, I was thinking Jaws, but I can't watch that film. I'm sorry.
Oh, is this because it's a bad film, or you've got a fear of it, or
it's I don't watch horror films, but that's horror to me. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, you're not a big horror. Oh, Jaws is fantastic. Have you actually seen Jaws before?
Yeah, it kind of ruined my holidays for about 10 years.
No, I'm good for watching Independence Day if you want. It's a film I've never seen. I've pretty much seen it just like scene by scene on like reviews and like clips of it and stuff like that. But no, we'll watch that. It's a disaster movie, and plus we got the second one coming out. I don't know if that's next year or the following year or something like that. And it is probably like, although it's not a Michael Bay film, it just seems like one. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll do a review on that. Cool. So so that will be our film club show on Thursday. We'll review Independence Day. Both of us haven't seen it, but we'll get round to a review to that. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of this summer movie season. What were some of your favourites? What didn't you like? I'm sure that Fantastic Four is probably going to be on everyone's list. So rate, like, comment, subscribe, get involved with the channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at cinema_savvy, and we're also on letterboxd.com at letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy. So get involved with the channel and be sure to check back Thursday for Independence Day review. I don't know if we've got confirmed what we're going to do for our Monday main show the following week, but we'll sort something out and we'll let you know during that film club review what we're going to be reviewing next. So until then, thank you very much for listening.